Hi, I'm Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, April 18th.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, real data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
Looking at significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean, we see remnants of what was a pretty strong gale in the far southeast Pacific, now fading off of Chile, not doing a whole lot now, but swell is definitely in the water, radiating north. Another small gale is developing south of New Zealand, not expected to do a whole lot, but perhaps another little system in the same area in a couple days might be productive. Let's get into the details. We'll start out by looking at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales when they form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, and we're in the southern hemisphere now. So a trough here would be pushing to the north, and because it's the southern hemisphere, opposite of the northern hemisphere, it would create a clockwise flow down aloft and down at the ocean surface. That would be the hallmark of low pressure. And low pressure, of course, if it's strong enough to generate winds. Winds, if they're strong enough, generate seas. Seas, if they're high enough, radiate away from the fetch area and turn into swell. And swell, of course, when it hits your beach, turns into surf. So we have the remnants of what was a solid trough in the far southeast Pacific, outside of the Southern California swell window. It would be right here, about 118 west. Okay, that trough moved out, it was a day or so ago. Okay, so now it's only of interest to Chile and perhaps Peru. And off to the west, we have a split jet stream flow. Northern branch here, southern branch here. Typically in between those branches, you get high pressure. And something that's trying to maybe sort of be a trough, but probably isn't, and nor will make it that way over the central South Pacific. So nothing to see there. Moving forward, though, a new trough is forecast right here on Monday night in the, we'll call it the South Central Pacific, being fed by 140 knot winds. That should help set up a little bit of low pressure there. As we move into Tuesday, the trough deepens, but it starts getting a little bit pinched as well as we get into Tuesday night and into Wednesday. Then pretty much shut down. There's still some semblance of a trough further south as we get into Wednesday. Not sure if that will be productive, but that too pretty much pinches off, and then things are all over. We have a ridge, the jet pushing south here as we get into Thursday morning under New Zealand. That'll only set up high pressure, and then a very confused state east of there. Continuing on, that pattern sort of holds as we get into Friday. It looks like a trough of some sort wants to get organized here under New Zealand as we get into Saturday, but doesn't have decent wind, upper level wind support. You want strong winds blowing up this west side of the trough. And maybe as we get into Sunday, we'll get a little of that, but not much. Not looking good, but in the far southeast Pacific, let's roll this back. As a matter of fact, so we get into, what was that, Sunday? But again, most of this new building trough here with good wind support here is outside of the California window. Again, focusing on, we'll say, Central America and points southward. So for now, one good trough forecast for the South Pacific for the coming week. Looking down at the surface level pressure, surface level winds. Here's remnants of a gale here, only 30 knot winds now impacting Patagonia. Another little system doing nothing, all fetch, 35 knot fetch, aimed due south at Antarctica, not north to our forecast area. And then, yes, some 35 knot west winds under New Zealand, but not really doing a whole lot. But we know a trough is forecast for this area, and you can see as we get into Tuesday, little leading fetch here, 35 knot winds, and another system building under New Zealand behind that with, well, that's 50 knot winds about later on Tuesday. That's the more likely system to generate swell, but all the fetches aimed off to the east. Continues pushing off into Wednesday with 40 knot west winds, and then maybe a little bit of southwest winds as we get into Wednesday night. And then, this is kind of new here, this building 40 to 45 knot fetch on Thursday, but then that quickly fades out. I mean, in terms of intensity, broad in coverage, though, as we get into Friday. Oh, look at this. And this is new. Latest update of the model here. 40 knot south winds building as we get into Saturday. This is very much, so this is interesting. During La Nina, typically your main development area for storms is the Southeast Pacific. And this year is doing exactly that. We've got 2 in flight generated in the Southeast Pacific. Here's another one. During the year after El Niños, the area tends to be over here. So we are on track for the moment. Anyway, fetch continuing into Saturday, fading out on Sunday, and then possibly some sort of a new system under New Zealand a week out. Don't believe the model's that far in advance, but something to keep our eyes on. Let's go take a look at the effect of those winds on the ocean surface. But first off, we're going back in time a little bit. Tuesday of last week, a gale built in the Southeast Pacific, not unexpected. 36-foot seas, building to 40 feet, midday Tuesday, lifting northeast pretty good, still at about, we'll say, 39 feet. Right here, the highest seas over this whole area and their positions, and then associated wind speeds with that too. And then we get into Wednesday. The Southern California swell window generally ends about 118 west, so this system moved out of the fetch area. But another system built right behind it with 26-foot seas, building to 31 feet on Thursday morning. This was the stronger of the two, and especially because most of its fetch was aimed due north. So we get into late Thursday, it was 37-foot seas, building to, it says 41 feet here, but we'll just say 40 feet and effectively 39 feet. This is the fetch area, but aimed very well off to the north. So as we got into Friday a couple of days ago, then started fading while lifting northeast and out of the swell window. Of the two systems, this clearly will be the larger of the swell producers. Minimal significant class swell is expected to arrive in Southern California, probably in the Saturday-ish time frame. You can look at the forecast, all the details we've worked out there for you. All right, and then into Saturday, things started settling down in Sunday. Oops, there we go. All right. And then looking forward, so we have this little fetch under New Zealand. It's not supposed to do much. But then the more interesting fetch, that little thing with 50-knot winds on Tuesday night, starts building, builds supposedly 36-foot seas over a very tiny area, quickly fading from there. But these two systems together should help create maybe some little swell. Most of the fetch aimed off to the east, so you got to really manage your expectations on how much swell will radiate to the north. Certainly relative to Hawaii, probably nothing. Southern California, the best bet. Still, 28-foot seas are forecast to traverse the South Pacific into Friday. And then remember, the system built up again. This is new, so 31-foot seas building to 32 feet on Saturday. So roughly a week later, some sort of a swell pushing into California. So we're looking 2 weeks out now for a swell. So that's not bad. I mean, there's a series of swells in the water, and it generally looks like, more is forecast. So that's the end of the run there. Then taking a quick look up north in the Gulf of Alaska, there is a tiny little, we'll call it a gale, with barely 20-foot seas, and then a bigger area of 20-foot seas, with most all of it aimed off to the north and northeast into British Columbia and points northward. But it's possible some small swell could radiate into Central California. But we'll just let the cat out of the bag. There's supposed to be a bunch of north winds at the same time whenever this swell arrives. And whatever it's size-wise, it'll be completely buried in California. Doubtful if anything will get down into Hawaii. Continuing on, though, there is another little fetch here of, what is that, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15-foot seas falling southeast on Monday. That too quickly fades out. Doubtful Hawaii will see anything from that. And then a trough is forecast building here. Get this area of, we'll call it disturbed weather, but not enough to really get any traction. Also notice another little low is forecast. Go back here. We're on Thursday. Building off Japan with maybe 22, 23-foot seas. Oh, there we go. 26-foot seas, is that? Aimed off to the southeast. So maybe some swell could result from that. And then we have a strong tropical system meandering around in the far west Pacific. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, and then things settle down. Speaking of that tropical system, so here is the Philippines. This system yesterday, what was that, Saturday evening, roughly somewhere right around here off the central Philippines, had winds of 170 miles per hour, I believe it was, 150 knots. Cat 5 system quickly is falling apart. Still pretty solid with winds at 125 knots right here this afternoon. And then you can see slowly fading, possibly recurving, and then, but only down to 60 knots by the time it actually makes, or we'll say 75 knots, makes any progress to the east. And looking at the models, it isn't supposed to make any significant headway off to the east. Way too early in the year for that. The jet stream isn't dipping south. It can't tap any of that energy. There is a bunch of chatter amongst some of the more studied meteorological folks suggesting that this is the earliest ever for a Cat 5 storm in the West Pacific. Attributable, of course, to warming sea temperatures. And so there's some concern there that the warming planet is driving earlier and stronger typhoons and hurricanes in our oceans. And a quick look at this storm here. It just went through an eye wall replacement cycle, a broad eye now in control. Broader area of winds around that eye of hurricane force winds yesterday when winds were 170 miles an hour is over a very small area. Now it's broadening out, though the system is weakening. For the most part, Philippines looking to be okay with the storm tracking off to the north. They will not get hit with any significant wind energy, but certainly swell energy. So let's go take a look at wind swell potential for Hawaii. Winds pretty light out of the east right now. No significant wind swell expected. And for that part along California too, 15-knot north winds, pretty shallow and fetch. Not a whole lot expected. Low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska, but we've already talked about that. As we get into Monday, high pressure starts building. 1030 millibar high right here. North winds building 15 to 20 knots along the North California coast, maybe some junky short period wind swell to result. Also easterly trades building just east of the Hawaiian Islands, 15 knots, maybe 20 knots, perhaps getting some traction. So we get into Tuesday, notice a very windy upwelling pattern again continues. 20, 25, 30-knot winds on Tuesday, and broader 30-knot winds over Northern California Tuesday afternoon. If water temperatures weren't cold enough, I don't know if they can get much colder, but this will just continue that just constant upwelling, constant northwest wind motion. As we get into Wednesday, again, wind swell production still there, 30-knot north winds off of Northern California. Wind swell fading out for Hawaii as the fetch fades. Thursday, fetch off California finally starts dying. Light winds south of the Golden Gate, 20, maybe 25 knots over Cape Mendocino. And even in the evening, that fades. As we get into Friday, light wind pattern everywhere, no wind swell. Notice this fetch out here, though, on Saturday, 20, 25 knot. A little bit off the coast. What is that? It's hard to say, but maybe some potential for generating wind swell. And there's some discussion about weather actually pushing into the California coast as well, as you can see here. So we get into Sunday, wind swell, for sure a real possibility, and maybe some rain as well. We can take it. So a quick look at precipitation potential for California. As we get into Tuesday, we'll say maybe low odds of some scattered showers along the coast and up in the Sierra. Maybe Wednesday night, a hint of some snow on the highest peaks, the highest elevations, but not super likely. Again, and then as we get into Wednesday, again, precip off of Central California down into maybe Southern California. A little bit of snow here suggested for the Central Sierra. Wednesday night into Thursday. Rain maybe into Southern California on Thursday morning. Just, maybe a shower at best. And then things settling down on Friday. But that low pressure system next weekend, forecast building, this seems hardly believable at this early date. In the Gulf of Alaska, rain into Cape Mendocino. And then as we get into Sunday, supposedly rain the whole way down past San Francisco into Monterey Bay with snow in the solid snow in the Sierras. we're looking at this, we're laughing. That's like a full winter snow dump. Don't believe it for a second, but it sure looks great on the charts. In fact, let's go look at snowfall totals. Squaw Valley supposedly with, 54 inches of snow. No, not a chance. Not even close. But it looks good. It's a nice tease. Snow levels. So right now there, where the gray ends and turns to white, that's where the freezing level is, assuming there's precipitation. So freezing level about 10,500 feet, dipping down as we get into the 20th to about the 85 to 9,000 foot range, and then back up into the 10 to 12,000 foot range on the 23rd of April. But then when that big event comes, supposedly snow levels down to 5,500 feet, something like that. Again, seems highly unlikely, but you never know. We'll keep our eye on it. All right, let's go take a look long term. What's going on with the Madden-Julian oscillation, and of course the La Nina, El Nino, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. As usual, we start by looking at winds on the equator. This is the East Pacific here. This is the West Pacific here. The equator, 0, right down the middle. The date line, 180 west right here. That's New Guinea right there. So we're just looking at the arrows. The colors are water temperatures. Winds out of the east. The stronger the arrow, the stronger the wind. So pretty brisk, we'll say nearly strong east winds over the East Pacific, turning moderate over the Central Pacific, and moderate turning to almost light to almost calm in the West Pacific, in what we call the Kelvin Wave generation area. This area from 135 east, as far west in the Pacific as you can go on the equator, to just east of the east of the date line, 170 west, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. So a box in your mind right there. When you get the active phase of the MJO over this area, the active phase of the MJO suppresses trades or can out and out reverse them. And what that will do is take warm water that's here, start pushing it off to the east. If the winds are strong enough and last long enough, they can create what's called a Kelvin wave. It's effectively a big bubble of warm water that traverses east along the equator, but not on the surface, under the surface of the ocean, the whole way across the Pacific. Takes about 3 months. Then eventually that ball of warm water impacts Ecuador and starts gurgling up to the surface, erupting to the surface, and starting warming ocean temperatures over here. If you get successive active phases of the MJO and successive Kelvin waves, you start getting heating in the far East Pacific. And of course, hot or warming ocean temperatures promote evaporation. Evaporation produces clouds, and that in turn feeds energy to the jet stream over here, but also can upset the Walker circulation. Basically, that's fancy words for the entire circulation of the planet gets affected by the MJO, successive active phases of MJO, and that's how you can get El Nino. And of course, El Nino, if it's strong enough, produces surf and lots of precipitation into California. All right, so much for the actual winds. It's the anomalies, the differences from normal for this time of year. Yeah, winds are pretty strong out of the east, but looking at the chart, there's no more easterly arrows, meaning these winds are pretty much normal. Across the Central Pacific, same deal. When you get into the West Pacific, look at this. Finally, after a year, some westerly anomalies. This is the first real active phase of the MJO we've had since since before April of last year. When La Nina took over. This is maybe a harbinger that La Nina is getting a good, solid kick out of the Pacific. Looking out the next 2 weeks, we're going to try to get a sense of what's going on with the MJO. How long will the active phase last, and how strong will it be? We'll start by looking at outgoing long-wave radiation, fancy words for cloud cover. The blues mean negative outgoing long-wave radiation, or lots of clouds preventing the sunlight from reflecting off the ocean surface, and that is the hallmark of course, the active phase of the MJO. Oh, and where are we? There's the equator right there. South America, Central America, Hawaii, New Guinea, Australia, you get it. Kelvin wave generation area, 170 west, 5 degrees north and south of the equator over to about here. So, active phase of the MJO, per the statistic model in the center of the Kelvin wave generation area, forecast to hold while slowly weakening over the next 10 days and then gone completely. But the dynamic model, and this is the same thing that's been going on for 2 or 3 weeks now. This model keeps saying active phase fading out. The dynamic model says, no, it's going to hold. It's going to stay. And notice the inactive phase building strong in the Indian Ocean. This has been where the low pressure bias, and we're not going to get into the details quite yet, but this has been the center of storm production for a year now. We're getting the sense that maybe it's starting to shift over into the West Pacific. It's not there yet, but it's trying. 40-day upper level model. All right, so 8 panels here, all of them the same. There is South America, Central America, the equator right there, New Guinea there, Australia, the Philippines, Kelvin Wave generation area, roughly right here. This is the area we're mainly interested in. All right, and the greens are areas favorable for precipitation. This is up at jet stream level. Now, it's not super favorable, but good enough, and you can get the definite sense the active phase slowly moving east, pushing into and over Central America. It's only on the equator, so okay, Ecuador, by about the 8th of May. So we have another 3 weeks of this still going on with the active phase. But behind that, the inactive phase, these oranges, areas not favorable for precipitation. Dry air, high pressure, however you want to characterize it. In the West Pacific, starting about the end of April, continuing its jaunt the whole way across the Pacific through about May 23rd. All right, and then behind that, another active phase of the MJO developing, mid-May, and it too making its way across the Pacific. So you can definitely see active phase, inactive phase, active phase, inactive phase. And of course, the active phases of the MJO, when they are over the Kelvin wave generation area, they impart energy to the jet stream, both in the northern hemisphere and in the southern hemisphere. So it's during this window here and this window here that we would expect to see storm production a little bit above normal in the South Pacific. That's not to say you can't get storm production during the inactive phases of the MJO, but it's not as common. Let's go out a month. Let's look at the east-west component of the wind and what the MJO is in fact doing. So this is the whole planet on one chart. The date line runs right up the middle. The West Pacific starts at 135 east, so right here, and the Kelvin wave generation area goes to 170 west, so right about here. So it's this area right in here that we're interested in forecast-wise. All right. Oh, and California is at 120 west, roughly speaking. So the whole Pacific Ocean is between here and about here, and then Ecuador is over about 80 west, somewhere like that. The solid contour is the active phase of the MJO. The dotted contour, the black one, is the inactive phase. So we had an inactive phase of the MJO back in March. Maybe we can show this here. We had a weak active phase. You can't really tell, but there were some westerly anomalies here back in February. That took warm water that's in the far West Pacific and has set it in motion, pushing east. Then we had our inactive phase, and now here comes the next active phase. Notice they start here. This is the Indian Ocean. The reds are westerly anomalies. Today, right here, active phase over the Kelvin wave generation area, producing westerly anomalies. It started last week, pretty strong westerly anomalies, and forecast to continue in some fashion into, maybe the 1st of May, something like that. So perhaps this will, one Kelvin wave generated there, perhaps a second Kelvin wave will be generated here. Then even after the active phase moves out, here's the inactive phase, not even in the Pacific by the end of May. Westerly anomalies, these orange, very weak, but still present. No easterly anomalies. That's a good sign. And then looking even further out. So this is the same chart, goes out 3 months, and it's reversed. Past performance is here. Here is that. The yellows, oranges are westerly anomalies. So this would have been the active phase of the MJO that generated the first Kelvin wave. Here is our newly developing active phase of the MJO with stronger westerly anomalies. And then looking up, it looks like maybe another as we get into the June time frame. Let's overlay the MJO. All right, so there was one active phase. The solid contours here. Here's our current active phase of the MJO. Forecast to move through the Kelvin wave generation area through about May 12th, something like that, the 10th. Then the inactive phase of the MJO is to follow. But notice, yes, there are easterly anomalies, but right in the core of the Kelvin wave generation area, westerly anomalies are to hold. Now, this model tends to overhype things, especially when you're talking a month or more out. But even if it were even just neutral anomalies, that would be better than easterly anomalies. And then, of course, way much overhyping here. See how strong this active phase is forecast in the June timeframe? Well, this one looked like that 3 months ago. So my assumption is this one, by the time it reaches, when we get 3 months down here, it'll be much less strong, but still westerly anomalies forecast. All right, the low pass filter. So this is sort of what is your El Nino La Nina indicator. These dotted contours, high pressure, and that's the Pacific basically filled with high pressure to a point south of California, just on the equator, right? But notice, from 4 contours to 3 to 2 to 1, and that 1 fading out and moving south of California by the end of the model run. Low pressure bias, which is the El Nino indicator, has been in the Indian Ocean, and in the next week, see that little tick there? That's been on that little indentation. That's been on the models for 2 months now, suggesting the low pressure bias is going to start making some significant headway, perhaps, off to the east. Now, this is interesting because previous runs had the actual leading edge contour filling the Kelvin wave generation area about 2 months into the model run. This one has backed off some. We'll keep our eye on this and see how it plays out. But the sense is this low pressure bias is to move into the Pacific as we get into the June timeframe. Whether it does or does not is kind of key, though, as to what's gonna happen as we get into fall. So we'll keep our eyes on that. So enough of the MJO. Let's go look and see what the ocean is doing. And there's methods to see the balance of heat and see whether it's changing over time in the Pacific. This is the East Pacific. This is the West Pacific here. This is the ocean surface. You go down 100 meters, 200 meters, 300 meters. It's this top 150 meters that we're really interested in. Warm water, 28 degree isotherm right here. That's 28 degrees centigrade. That's pretty warm water. So all winter long, it was over at like 165 east. Look where it's moved in just about the past month. We're almost at 172 west now. This is a significant change even from last week when we were at, I think, 180 west. And that doesn't look like a lot on a chart, but that's a lot of distance and a lot of warm water pushing east. And the 24 degree isotherm, much deeper, thicker, much more warm water pushing off to the east. What's that mean? Well, trades have been blowing from east to west very hard for a year now. They took all the warm water that was here, balled it up over here. If the trades are relaxing, the warm water is starting to flow back off to the east, and that's what this suggests. In fact, looking at anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year, 2 weeks ago, there was a ball of very cold water off of Peru right here. That's all gone. 2 degree above normal centigrade temperatures in the West Pacific, a river of warm water flowing off to the east, impacting close to the Ecuadorian coast and reaching up to the surface supposedly as of today. This higher res model shows the same thing, a little bit behind. It's the 13th of April, but you see a river of warm water pushing the whole way across the Pacific, the last little bit of cool water from La Nina off the Ecuadorian coast getting squeezed to the surface as this bulldozer of warm water pushes from west to east, squeezing that out. Also notice warm water almost, 10 meters, was that 30 feet from the surface of the ocean at about 105 west. So maybe in the next week, we're going to start seeing warm water from this. This is a Kelvin wave. From this Kelvin wave impacting and starting to provide evidence of its existence in the East Pacific, and that should certainly take a chunk out of La Nina. Sea surface height differences. So kind of hard to read this, but that is South America there. There's Central America, Mexico. Where's Hawaii? Right there. You can barely see it. This is the equator here. This is the date line. There is New Guinea. All right, and what we're looking at is JSON-3 satellite data. It's measuring the height of the ocean surface. You strip out the waves, strip out the wind waves, strip out the tides, and is the sphere of the Earth higher or lower than normal? And what we're seeing is right here and right here, and it's only on the equator we're really interested is the height is about normal, which is good because it's been below normal for a year now, driven by easterly winds, one that scoops out water, pushes it all to the west, but also cold water at depth, of course, contracts. That creates a divot on the ocean surface. When you see a return to normal, that suggests that, well, at a minimum, normal water temperatures, but we also know, we think much warmer temperatures are below the ocean right here, and that's rising the ocean's surface, setting us back to normal. Also notice this area here by Ecuador and the Galapagos right there, starting to build, rising, suggesting warm water is on the verge of gurgling to the surface. We said about 105 west, so 105 west would be right there. So we'll keep our eyes on that. Looking at differences from normal for the ocean surface, not subsurface, but at the surface. So here's, and maybe we can get, there we go, get that a little bit more centered. All right, so Peru, Chile, Central America, and then the equator is, there's two lines here, but roughly there's the Galapagos on out here. Notice, much colder than normal water along Peru. This is the last little bits of that cold water at depth that's getting pushed to the surface by the approaching Kelvin wave. 105 west would be right here. Notice water temperatures maybe rising a little bit. This is the area to keep your eye on over the coming week or two. And warm water, not much. It's just pretty much normal, but that's way better than where we've been for a long time, trying to get a foothold here over the equator. Also, warm water up here off of Central America. Notice this here, cold water coming down from California. High pressure here, stronger than normal, driven by La Nina, causes upwelling, driving that cold flow. And then the same thing theoretically happening in the southern hemisphere. This little pocket here, it was kind of moving in this direction or angled to the northwest. It's gotten flatter lately. We're not quite sure what, if anything, that means. But the sense is that, one, all these water temperatures are getting warmer and they're not as dense and cold as they were a year ago, suggesting that that La Nina is fading out. Sea surface temperature trend for the past 7 days. 105 west right there. Warming temperatures. Notice some warming here around the Galapagos. Not so much that it's getting hot, but that it was so iceberg cold. And there also along Peru, it was so cold by that deep cold water being upwelled to the surface by the approaching Kelvin wave that there is, what this is suggesting is there isn't much cold water left to upwell. And that, if anything, what's starting to gurgle to the surface is at least getting warmer. Not warm, but getting warmer, suggesting the pool, the reservoir of cold water is slowly fading. And then, of course, here's the backed off view. We want to see this disappear and start turning yellow or orange right up into here. That would be the signal that the Kelvin wave is starting to impact this area. Might be another week or two, or maybe even 3. But at some point it's going to happen, and then when that happens, we expect all this to start turning yellow in this area too. The question is, how long will it last? Will there be a second Kelvin wave that will approach and reinforce the first one, or is all this just going to sort of fade apart? And then as we get into fall, La Nina somehow magically wakes up again and these trades start nuking and we fall back into a cold regime. We don't know yet. So what does the atmosphere think is going on? The atmosphere, of course, lives above the ocean, right? The atmosphere is influenced by the ocean. We've talked about evaporation. All that and the effects that significant evaporation can have on the jet stream and on the atmosphere, energy transfer into the atmosphere. Okay, so what does the atmosphere think is going on? Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, which is basically over the Indian Ocean, and Tahiti, which is in the Pacific Ocean. When pressure is falling over Tahiti, the index goes negative. When pressure is rising over Tahiti, the index goes positive. We want to see negative numbers. Today, minus 1.01, which isn't a whole lot. It's been negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, 7 days, and I'm just ignoring that one there. Okay, suggesting, well, if anything, maybe the active phase of the MJO is starting to take root, because the active phase is like a low pressure system over the West Pacific near Tahiti. We'll see if that bears itself out. But this is kind of a noisy regime. 30-day average all this out over 30 days. The value today is 0.46, almost dead neutral, and it's been there for a couple of days. Where were we? Oh, we've actually been negative. I mean, we've been somewhere near neutral for a month now. That is a good thing, because this was up, I think it was up to positive 19 a couple of months ago. So definitely the atmosphere thinks something is going on. The 90-day average takes even more of the noise out of it. Its value today plus 4.44, but you can see it was up to 10. I think this went up to 12 or almost 15 at one point. So it too is fading. The atmosphere thinks that La Nina, maybe it's not over, but it's definitely weakening. In fact, let's graph this data out. So here we go. The 30-day average was negative back in 2019, borderline minimal El Nino. And then in 2020, in April, we started moving positive. The beginning of La Nina setting up, peaking out in late January at plus 20, according to this index. But then notice since then, this precipitous fall, and we're just sort of gurgling along right at neutral now. And with the active phase supposedly building, we would expect to see this maybe drop a little bit more. If it doesn't, that might be some signs of the stubbornness of La Nina. But for now, we're at least moving in the right direction. We have two charts we forgot to show earlier. Upper ocean heat anomalies. This is the West Pacific here, East Pacific here. This is April, May and April of last year. Blues, colder than normal water temperatures in the East Pacific. The beginnings of La Nina. A little bit of a Kelvin wave in July. Tried to do something. Quickly faded. Then massive east trades. Taking warm water, displacing it off to the east. You can see, to the west. You can see that here. Colder than normal temperatures prevailed. And now, right at the peak of this warm water buildup in the far West Pacific, and just past the peak of La Nina, warm water, boom, started moving off to the east. Today, there's that 100 to 105 west mark. Kelvin wave in flight, a pretty solid Kelvin wave indeed, so keep that in mind. Also, sea surface temperatures in the Niño 1.2 region. This is the area right there along the Galapagos and Ecuador. Hovering, pretty cold still, 0.890, 890 thousandths of a degree below normal. Effectively 1 degree below normal. This is where all those deep blues we were seeing along Peru, that's what's driving all this. As soon as that Kelvin wave erupts, we would expect to see this start at least reaching normal and probably higher than that. Then the official El Nino monitoring region, the Nino 3.4 region, from an area south of California out to about the dateline. Today's value, minus 0.2, 0.2 of a degree below normal. It's been pretty stable there since early March. At some point, if the Kelvin wave does erupt, and there's another one behind it, and it does erupt, and there's warm water in the far East Pacific, trades will carry that warm water into this region, and this will begin to rise. When we get to a half a degree above normal for 5 consecutive 3-month periods, then they can declare official El Nino. We don't expect that to happen at all. But we're officially, La Nina is below this mark here. So at least from a sea surface temperatures perspective, for the moment, we are not in a La Nina pattern. Now the question is, will we go up or will we go back down? What's going to happen? Let's go see what one model says. Sea surface temperature forecast from the CFS version 2 model for the Niño 3.4 region, the official El Nino monitoring region. Today, temperatures effectively neutral, maybe 0.05 below normal, and forecast building to 0.05 above normal as we get into the early part of summer. Now this model is the conservative holdout has been just doggedly declaring we're going back to La Nina, and it's still doing that. In October, temperatures down to half a degree below normal, falling to about 0.7 of a degree below normal as we get into the December timeframe, which really isn't that bad. We were down, at one point this model here, we were down at -1.25, so see, that's not even really hardly La Nina. This model at one point back here was saying we're going down to 2 degrees below normal, so it's definitely biased cold. We'll see what happens, but I suspect as we get out of the spring unpredictability barrier, which goes through about the end of May, something like that, that this will sort itself out and probably settle down in the 0.2 of a degree below normal, something like that. All the other models, there's some other charts we look at. There's 25 different El Nino, La Nina models, some statistics, some dynamic, and they're all generally hovering around dead neutral for the coming fall and winter. This guy seems to have an early beat on things sometimes, and then sometimes he's just out and out wrong. So, but we're watching it pretty closely, and we have access to this updates daily, so it's kind of fun to get lured along and watch what it suggests. All right, so some good news. One, there is a little swell in the water right now, not much, and it's supposed to hang on for another day or so. But there is 2 very south-angled swells heading for California. One of them for Southern California, near significant class size, so head high or above, at most spots. That would be good, and that would be into late in the work week and through the weekend. So swell is certainly possible then, and up into Northern California, the most exposed breaks, very south-angled, like 180 to 184 degrees, something like that. So pick your spots carefully. And then after that, well, maybe another small one, that New Zealand system that's forecast. Probably not a whole lot expected from that. So we'll keep our eyes on that. Longer term, Kelvin Wave in flight, active phase of the MJO in flight, all things looking generally favorable for the demise of La Nina and at least a return to normal as we get into fall and maybe early winter of this year, of 2021 into 2022. Yeah, we're talking about surf 9 months from now, and we don't trust models out more than 3 or 4 days. But it appears that that's what's happening. Large Kelvin wave in flight. It cannot be denied. That's a river of warm water pushing off to the east. So, lots of excitement there. Maybe this will be a short run of La Nina. We can hope, but we're not going to cross our fingers. All right. And so, if you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. You know how to do it. It's right there on the YouTube down below this video. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. Go to stormsurf.com. All the data you see in this video is present on the site there. You can follow along and then come see the video. Links to the video are posted at the top of every page on the Stormsurf website. You can click and watch the video there. Comments, always welcome. Likes, always welcome. Please give us a thumbs up or a like if you enjoyed the video. And we plan to do this again next week. Same time, same channel, assuming the surf isn't too good. Other than that, stay safe, get some waves, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.